Alrighty. So this is our group project on chronic illness and the effectiveness or effect on students for what week is this? Week 8 or 9, 7 or 8, one of those. But yeah.
Okay, so these are my facts on chronic illness. So chronic illnesses are long-term medical conditions that require continuous management and care. They can impact individuals of all ages, including children and adolescents. It's essential to acknowledge that these conditions can both be visible and invisible. Chronic illnesses are long-term. Students dealing with chronic illnesses may experience symptoms like pain, fatigue, or distress, which can hinder their concentration and ability to participate in class. Their emotional health may also suffer due to the stress and uncertainty that often accompanies chronic conditions. Research findings have consistently shown that students with chronic illnesses are more likely to struggle academically, miss school.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The next one.
School and face discrimination or bullying from their peers. Educating the class about myths and misconceptions is crucial to dispel stereotypes and promote understanding. Common misconceptions might include the belief that students with chronic illnesses are using their condition as an excuse or are lazy. Another myth could be that chronic illness is only about physical symptoms and doesn't affect mental health. These stereotypes can be deeply hurtful to students and their families, and addressing them is essential. Educators also play a vital role in supporting students with chronic illnesses. To this end, it's crucial to provide practical recommendations to teachers and school staff. Ways to help these students can include encouraging open communication with the student and their family. This can foster trust and understanding. Flexibility in terms of attendance, assignments, and deadlines can alleviate some of the academic pressure. Creating a supportive and inclusive classroom environment with the involvement of classmates is also really beneficial. Developing an IEP, an individualized education plan tailored to the student's need, is a formal way to address specific educational accommodations. Offering additional resources such as access to counseling or tutoring can further enhance the student's experience. Peers, the other students, also have a significant role in supporting their classmates who have chronic illnesses. It's important to provide guidance for those classmates, which can include practical tips, such as avoiding making assumptions about the student and their capabilities. It's also really important for peers to be empathetic and inclusive, and it helps to reduce the isolation that a student with chronic illness might feel or experience. It's important to offer assistance when needed while respecting the student's independence and boundaries. This creates a more comfortable and supportive environment for them, socially and academically. Encouraging classmates to report any bullying or discrimination they witness to teachers or school staff can also help to ensure a safe and welcoming atmosphere at school. Chronic illness not only affects the individual student, but also their family. Families are encouraged to seek support from healthcare professionals and connect with support groups where they can find guidance, share experience, and access resources. Just generally be supported with people going through the same thing as them. Open communication with the family can help alleviate some of that stress and create a supportive environment. Again, very important. Encouraging self-care and stress management is also vital to maintain the family's well-being while dealing with the challenges of chronic illness. Helping them to develop a routine and action plan for managing the chronic illness at school can help provide that structure, and a little bit of predictability helps them make school go by a little bit easier.
All right, so the CDC technically classifies chronic illness as a disability. There are 3 different acts that came into effect that can help students in the classroom with chronic illness. So the first act was the American with Disabilities Act, and it basically says that it prohibits discrimination against any individual with a disability by any state or local government service, program, or activity. It also says you have to make a reasonable accommodation accessible for people with disabilities. So reasonable accommodation, we can break that down just a little bit. It means that if it is too expensive, or if there's not enough funding, or if it's just out of the ballpark kind of thing, that then the Americans with Disabilities Act cannot cover that. The second act was the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It prohibits excluding any individual from an activity that receives federal funding. And that basically says that a student with a disability, such as chronic illness, cannot be discriminated against based on their disability. It also mandates schools to provide free public access to school to disabled students as adequately as they do for non-disabled students. And the final act is the Individuals with Disabilities Act. It's basically states that you should make available free and public education, and emphasizes special education related services to meet the unique needs of each student. So each of these special education services should require some sort of above and beyond from either the parents, the teacher, or the nurse, and all these people should be involved in the students' education as well as their healthcare in the education program. And any school, this also says that any school that receives funding from the government or the federal government should be able to accommodate each and every one of these chronic illness students. So more than 40% of school-age children and adolescents have at least one health condition. That's just below 50%, and it's enough that it's significant to affect an education for a lot of people. Many of these illnesses can be more complex than others, such as diabetes. Diabetes requires insulin shots when blood sugar gets too low or too high. And there's many other complex illnesses like heart problems. Many students have different things going on that require medical attention. There's also just some basic chronic illnesses that require schools to prepare the student for an emergency, such as allergic reactions. The CDC stated that many schools are required to keep a stock of epinephrine, which was very interesting. And not just epinephrine, but insulin and other medicines that are consulted with the parent and doctor as well. Children or adolescents also have to be taken out of class to be able to control their chronic health conditions, which can ultimately affect their education.
All righty, thank you. Oh, you also had that one.
Yes. So it can also, so these things that pull children out of class can be going to the nurse and or going home, just basically anything that disrupts the average education time of a student that is not affected by a chronic illness. This affects children with extra stress and them not having to think about school, which really is not in the benefit for them because it can ultimately affect their learning and also their mindset of how school is. It also hinders academic learning because it's interrupted instruction time. And yes, so basically the ways that we have seen in school when we were younger were we saw a nut allergy table in the cafeteria where these students were kind of discriminated against. There was no nut policy in classrooms, and also there was student school and parent involvement where the parent would contact the school nurse and the teacher to basically let them know that there was an issue with chronic illness in their student or in their child.
All right, thank you. I think that was the last one. Okay, cool.
So
All right. So there are three different impacts of chronic illness, known as social, psychological, and educational. Brendan went over this earlier. I'm going to second that a little bit. So chronic illness children are at higher risk when trying to make social connection. This is due to restricted physical playing and or feeling out of place from your peers. A lot of times when kids have, whether it's a physical like disease or if they have like psychological problems with like autism or ADHD, a lot of times it can be harder for them to connect with other peers because they don't share that connection with them, or sometimes just having a social battery at all can be really difficult. Even though students with chronic illness may have more trouble connecting with other students, it is important they go to a regular school so they can make social connections with other students. So going off of that, it's not impossible for students to like go to class and like make friends, because more likely than not, there's maybe even one or two people that they can connect with, whether it's if it's in a special education class or just if they were in a different class, saying they had a special interests, and people connect through special interests quite a bit. So that's one thing that we want to try and encourage to students, whether it's physical or mental. Around 1/5 of students with chronic illness have emotional and behavioral problems. So because it's kind of like the students live different lives, whether it's they're in and out of the hospital or they need to take medication, they have a different they had a different childhood slash life where they grew up, and it wasn't as, let's say, normal for them as it was the other kids, and it's kind of common that they don't mature with that. So anxiety and depression are common in children with chronic illness. This may come as either obvious or a shocker. It depends which side of the spectrum you look at. But a lot of times when students can't make the connections we were talking about before, they have a lot of trouble keeping themselves up or making friends or doing anything outside or in an activity. So, and that can lead to being anxious and being depressed. And a lot of times it's overlooked. So something we should always, as teachers slash professors, should always look out for in our students. Around half of the students with chronic illness are absent from class in relations to their peers. And relations to their peers meaning just on average with other students. But a lot of them are gone because whether it's they need to take a mental day or they're in and out of the hospital, or even they didn't make it to school because something happened. These are different examples of why half the students with chronic illness don't make it to class, and it can be harder to teach them that way, but we can't always give up hope on them because they still need to learn just like everybody else. Illness severities and adverse effects of treatment regimes also contribute to cognitive impairment in children with chronic illness. There are some diseases that happen more often to chronically ill students. Examples are epilepsy, diabetes, asthma, cancer, and heart disease. These are more of the physical ones. A few of these I've seen as examples of why students in college, high school, or elementary, why they can't show up to either work or class, and it's a lot harder, especially with epilepsy and diabetes. Those are pretty common, like everyday ones. Epilepsy, a lot of people have seizures and they can't work because they have migraines, and diabetes, as we all know, is a blood glucose problem. So it has a lot of trouble trying to make sure they don't go below the levels or above those levels or anything like that. Asthma, cancer, and heart diseases are all some of the more serious ones. Asthma, I see a lot. Almost everywhere I go, I see someone with an inhaler, so it's not super uncommon. But cancer and heart diseases are pretty big deals, and we need to make sure we're not singling them out because of it. So there are 3 different ways to manage a student chronic illness. There's school-based, home-based, and hospital schooling. So school-based is to have students attend school like other kids without chronic illnesses, to have them live semi-regular lives. So that goes based off of like chronic illnesses students, whether they're physical or mental, making sure they're still trying to attend school as much as they can and getting learning across. That way they can still progress through grades and still have a normal education. This is probably for students that are only have milder chronic illnesses, someone that are more regulated like ADHD or autism, or maybe if they're coming at the end of a physical chronic illness. Home base is where students will teach at home, where students be taught at home. I worded that wrong. Where students will be taught at home with limited education while monitoring the child and attending to their needs. So it's exactly what you think is like homeschooling. There's probably a computer program and the teacher gives out homework online and stuff like that, because the student needs to be monitored or they need to take constant medication, or they can't leave school because of like their autoimmune disease or something. And then hospital schooling is what it suggests, very limited schooling with constant care needed. So like they're constantly getting medication, they need around the clock care because that's like along the physical sides, whether it's um like before heart disease or cancer, those are one of the more physical ones. Or if a student gets suicidal, some need to get psychiatric care. That's another one where it's probably hospital schooling. And then we should base children with chronic illness with intervention based on their diagnosis and not that they're just sick. So that basically means like, oh, person has a cold and this person has cancer. We should treat them the same. No, we should treat them based off what they have. There are sources, and that completes the presentation. Thank you all for listening. If I can end this.